Your mind, it's time to redefine. You're the spiritual quest, leaving the rest behind. Ungovernable, breaking through the status quo. We untamable, watch our spirit elevating consciousness. Yeah, we on the rise. No system can hold us down. We're reaching new heights, breaking through the chains, breaking through the wall. Ungovernable energy.
All right. I think I have, this might be a 1 week only kind of situation.
What is?
I think I have a new intro.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you know where you are?
You're in the jungle, baby.
No.
You're gonna die.
It is a play on that.
Oh, whoa.
You're watching Ungovernable, baby. No?
I don't think it's too many syllables.
Oh my God. Anyway, our daughter just
rocked it again.
Rocked it, killed it.
So good.
She was the lead on Welcome to the Jungle as well as Paradise City and what was the Motley Crue song?
Kickstart My Heart.
Kickstart My Heart. It was
Kickstart My
absolutely fantastic. So
kicking ass.
Yes,
and
yeah.
then kicking ass again 2
And-
lines later.
yeah. It is the most redundant thing.
It really is.
With the exception of what's the Kid Rock song where he says doing funny things and smoking funny things or whatever in back-to-back lines.
But Eminem is back in Houdini.
Is he?
Have you listened to it?
No.
Freaking love it.
Really?
I love it.
All right.
Whatever.
We'll have to have him on.
Get him on. Do some live.
For anyone who is unfamiliar, this is Ungovernable. I am Matt. This is Jocelyn. We come at you every Sunday night at 7 p.m. when real life doesn't get in the way. So
we could have an interruption tonight.
Yeah, there's chaos going on upstairs. I don't know. There's dogs, there's kids fighting, all kinds of other stuff, but such is the life. All right, I'm going to pull down the banner. We have some business to take care of before we get to our awesome guest.
I'm going to try to show you the label because you didn't do a very good job showing last time.
No, the shade was like killing me last time.
I feel like it's an elephant man and maybe a little person.
I thought it was like, I don't even know what it was. It was like a rock.
It's called Constantius.
Yeah, Constantius.
Oh, Constance.
Yeah, like Constantinople, Constantius.
I thought it was like Constantine.
I don't know.
The biblical character. Is that a biblical character?
Constantine. I don't know if it's a.
It was a
biblical
movie with demons and angels, right?
Yeah, that's. There's a biblical.
That says Bible to me.
I don't think that was from the Bible, but anyway, Constantius. It's
Johannes.
The vintner is Johannes Trappel.
You always go with the accent.
Yeah, I try. It sounds cool, doesn't it?
All right.
It is red wine as usual. It is Blauer Zweigelt, 100% from Austria. So
okay,
that is the red wine. It is a dry farm wine as usual. Again, dry farm wines. If you would like to sponsor us, that would be fantastic.
Oh, one day you guys should.
Yes, we should probably tag them once so they actually know that we talk about them. All right. Are you ready for me to intro the guest? Of course. Okay. Awesome.
I spilled the wine. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing.
I've used this quote a million times. To quote Rodney Dangerfield, we're off to a great stop. Anyway, we have a fantastic guest this evening. We are talking about unschooling, a passion of Jocelyn and I. And our guest is Kristen Himm. Kristen is a former public school teacher turned unschool mom and advocate.
Interesting twist there.
Yes.
Public school to unschooling, not just homeschooling.
Yes. She currently unschools her 2 children, ages 11 and 7. So we know a little bit about that in terms of our kids. Ages. While also running an unschool-inspired space where they offer clubs, programs, events, support, and community for other unschool families. Kristen also provides Unschool coaching and support to parents everywhere. So with that, Kristen,
Hello.
welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
You are coming to us from beautiful New Mexico, which is
New
fantastic.
Mexico's beautiful.
We've had people from so many awesome places within the last couple of weeks. But you grew up in the very southern point, I guess, of New Jersey. What took you from New Jersey to
have you
New
heard
Mexico?
of the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey?
Oh, wait.
In the
hold
Pine Barrens?
No.
Apparently, the Pine Barrens hold within it the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey. I'm sorry, totally random out there.
That's what the mafia tells everyone
find out
so that
next
they
week,
can,
though.
you know,
There you go.
Bermuda Triangle people. No, that being said, sorry.
Sorry.
Back to a serious question. What took you from, I believe, Cape May in New Jersey out into New Mexico?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of three girls, and my oldest sister and her husband moved here in 1998, and I visited a few times and decided to move here in 2004. My other sister moved here at the same time I did, so we were all here for a while, and then the eldest and her husband are back on the East Coast now. They're in Pennsylvania.
Oh my God, you got catfished.
No, they were here. We were all here together for like 6 years, and we kind of knew that they might not always stay here. But my other sister and I are still here. We actually live a block away from each other. We're very close. And she is actually one of my biggest inspirations to unschooling because she was doing it a long time before me. So
that is awesome.
One thing I'm not familiar with is New Mexico law for homeschooling, unschooling. What do parents have to do there?
yeah, it's a pretty lax place for for homeschooling and making unschooling pretty easy. So we have to register our kids online once a year to say that we're homeschooling. And then we are told to keep records and stuff like that, but nobody ever really follows up on us. There's no testing, there's no portfolios, there's no evaluations of any kind. I think the only families that we've ever heard of needing to provide documentation are those when, child services is called by some nosy neighbor or something like that. So, but for those of us that have decent neighbors and nobody reporting us, we're pretty much left alone.
The beauty of the inefficiency of bureaucracy. Right. All right. So how do you want to begin the conversation?
I'm going to follow you.
Oh, you're following me.
I'm
Okay.
following.
All right. So I want to talk about kind of your background. Even before we started talking about your teaching background, what was your experience with schooling like? Did you actually have a favorable experience with schooling in your childhood, or was it something different than that?
This is why you asked the questions.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. So I did have a favorable experience of school as a kid. I did well. I got good grades without really trying. I was one of those annoying kids where I didn't really have to do much, but I think, looking back now from this lens, I think that's because I figured out kind of how school worked. I kind of like the game, if you want to call it a game. Like I figured out how to win the game without really putting forth much effort. And so I had great school experience. When I was in 8th grade, I was in this like new experimental program in our middle school where they were mixing ages and doing sort of project-based learning and stuff like that. And it was lots and lots of fun. At the end of the year, they imposed some standardized testing on us, which wasn't new. We'd always had standardized testing, but because we were in this new program, the 8th graders in particular in this program were being asked to take 2 standardized tests instead of just 1. And so some of my friends and I got really angry about it. And we protested. We filled in E for every answer on the test. Yeah. And so our teachers, quickly figured out what was going on and like reported us and stuff like that. And we all got in trouble. Like we got in-school suspension and had to retake the test. But we had one teacher that totally had our back and was like, good for you for standing up for what you believe in, and he was amazing. And to make the story more dramatic, his contract would not be renewed after that year. They were not inviting him back to the school.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
that turned into like this whole other thing where like and he was, of course, an amazing teacher that inspired kids to read and, you know, did all of these, had a very unconventional classroom. And so he was kind of my inspiration into teaching.
That's a fantastic story.
I think it also is a commentary on like teachers these days, and the I think it's different. So I was in school. Let's see, I was born in 1977. And like, so in second grade, now it was a Catholic school too, though. But in second grade, we had a teacher that would take us to her house for hot chocolate every Christmas and take us caroling around her neighborhood. And like nowadays, that would be so frowned upon that you can't really step outside of the box in your teaching in the same way.
Did she own a panel van?
No, stop. Stop. She was my favorite teacher.
No, I'm sorry. Obviously, in fourth grade, I had the same experience. I went to like a religious school until I was in fourth grade, and then in fifth grade I went into public school. So imagine that kind of shock, right? Like in terms of that transition. In fourth grade, our teacher, she took us to her house, and she had like a pool at her house. So like all the kids got to go and have a pool party basically at the house, and it was still considered like a school field trip because like everyone had to sign permission slips. The parents could have come if they wanted, so like a couple came, but like
now that would never happen.
No, it's a completely different world now. I love the fact that you were born out of the fires of defiance of standardized testing and oppression, basically.
Yes.
How did you do on the standardized test after you actually decided to give it a go?
I mean, I always scored well on those tests. I really did. I figured out what kind of standard answers they wanted for their standardized tests and was able to. And I mean, in those days, there were 0 like essay questions. It was 100% multiple choice. So it was really just picking the right one or process of elimination or whatever. And I always did pretty well with those tests. And I did, once they told us we had to retake it, was like, fine, I'll do the test. So
throw out the 2 most erroneous answers, and then the other 2 you just have to decide whichever one's the most logical. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was an awful standardized tester.
Well, no, you're artistic.
I'm like, all of a sudden they're like, all or none? One? That just blew me for I can't do that. I was not ever good at I had to go to Huntington Learning Center to do my SATs a second time. But even so, I didn't do awful. I got over 450 on both.
We're a heck of a pair, Kristen, because when I was younger, I used to get basically accused of being autistic, and she was artistic. So like we're just off by 1 letter. That's basically the way it goes. All right. So after that experience, what led you to be a teacher? What did that progression look like?
Yeah, so it really was kind of like it was kind of like right then. It almost felt like a calling, because teachers always say they felt called, and I really did. But it was more that I saw this guy who cared about his students and didn't care so much about, the administration and his bosses. And so at that point is when I think I really realized how quite broken the school system was, or maybe I didn't fully comprehend it at the age of 14, but I was starting to recognize that. And so my thought was, I'll be like him. I'll be a change maker. I'll be a force for positive change from inside the system and help change it. So that's what I did. And oddly enough, because I was so furious with that public school for firing my teacher, I actually asked my parents to send me to Catholic school for high school, because it was literally the only other option in Southern New Jersey. There's like the public school and the Catholic school, right?
Yep.
So my dad hated that. And my parents had actually only split about a year before that. And my dad hated Catholic school when he was a kid and had on purpose been kicked out of Catholic school. So he was like, no, don't do it. And my mom was like, sure, you can go there if you want. We'll figure it out. So I did for a year go to Catholic school, but quickly realized that wasn't where I belonged either. And then at the same time, when I was about to go back to public school, my mom got a job offer in Maine. And so my mom and I ended up moving to Maine when I was 15. And I went to this like small, very artistic, semi-private high school there.
Mhm.
And because of the difference in credits, I was actually able to graduate at the end of my junior year, which worked for me because I was like, let's get to college, get the degree so I can start teaching. My oldest sister had promised me I would love college because I could study what I wanted. I mean, and then when I got there, I realized college was a whole lot like high school, quite frankly. And, you know, I still did the degree and everything, but it wasn't to me any better looking back. So,
Yeah.
Well, see, I thought high school, well, so I never went to traditional college, but I hated high school. And I tried to stay as far. I mean, emotionally, I was a wreck. I hated it. I begged my parents to send me to like Villa Walsh, which is like an all-girls school.
She wanted to go to an all-girls school. That
Yeah,
was like-
but I don't think my SATs or my testing was up to grade. So I had to go to public school, and then when I went to go to college, I went to college for musical theater, which is like not regular college. And then eventually when I went for my bachelor's and my master's, I went I went to schools where I did art all the time, and our classes were in circles on the ground. And when I did have to take like our class on the DSM, because I went to school for psychology, we got to pick a diagnosis, and then we had to create the environment and do an artistic project on it. So we did anorexia, we did like eating disorders, my group, and we turned the room and we plastered the walls with advertisements, and then the garbage bags had all these McDonald's wrappers coming out of them. Oh, it was freaking awesome.
Just wall to wall.
So that was
Kate Moss, just
exactly.
Yeah.
And it was no windows, and it was so much fun. Like that was my college experience. So I can't say that I've never experienced that.
You're lucky. Yeah. I very much so had a traditional college experience, with the exception of the fact that I got to go to school in New Orleans. But yeah, I went to school for science and engineering. So that was one of those things where it was like, I don't know. It is like the ultimate, how should I put it? I actually, in the vein of like Catholic school, right? Like it's the ultimate enticement, but also punishment. Like there is the playground that is New Orleans, like right outside your building, and yet it's 2:00 in the morning and you're working on calculus problems. Like, right? Like that's like self-flagellation, like all over the place, right?
So what did you teach in school when you were a teacher?
So I started out teaching elementary level. I taught for 1 year in Virginia after finishing my degree, and then I moved here. So I barely even count the year in Virginia since most of my career was here. But I taught 5th grade in Virginia, and then I taught 2nd grade here for 5 years. Then I taught a math intervention program, which meant I worked with all elementary grades, like kinder through 5th, and I pulled kids out of class to work with them just on math.
Was
then
it
they
the
dissolved.
new math?
I don't know that I would call it. People have different names for the whole math thing. I wouldn't call that new math. And it was pre-Common Core. Common Core came out a little bit after that. And I have plenty of opinions about Common Core. But
I hear abacus is the way to learn math.
Abacus?
Have you heard in the homeschool community? They're all about the abacus. Am I right? I'm right. You've not heard this? There's the abacus. It teaches you.
Kristen's like, I don't know.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Have you not seen all the abacus programs for homeschool?
No.
This is apparently the way to teach your kids math.
Those are the people that like don't believe in technology too, though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? No, I think it's like a way of deciphering things down.
This might be people that are just
I don't do math.
Enamored with like they just want their kids to be little. I'm gonna get canceled on YouTube. They're gonna want their kids to be little Asian kids. Like that's basically what they want.
Oh my god. No, there's abacus people.
Kristen's like, and disconnect.
People say the abacus is like the way to. I'm serious.
It could be. It's
especially for young if they're interested in it, But like,
it's better than the contrived stuff that they come up with. But so anyway, you did math intervention
I did
this contrived stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they dissolved that program after a few years. So I had to go back into the classroom. The only spot they had for me at that point was kinder, which I did, and found quickly that kindergarten was not my place. It was also the year I gave birth to my oldest child. So I got to miss 8 weeks of it. And I also had an amazing assistant who more or less ran my class all year. Even after I came back from maternity leave. They moved me up to 5th grade the year after that at my request. And that was a fun year. And it got me thinking I wanted to teach middle school. So, which was an interesting.
Middle school's different.
Yeah, middle school. And it was interesting too, because I had a professor in college who told me I belonged in middle school as a middle school teacher. And I was like, no, little kids for me. And then I got to middle school. I was like, oh, these kids are amazing. I love this age. So I taught middle school science, 7th grade science for 5 years. And at the end of my 5th year, there was an administrative opening at that school. And I did not have credentials to be an administrator, but I ended up in that position anyway. So I actually went that route, and then I took, because I wasn't credentialed, I had to start taking classes to work on a master's degree. And it was that first class, maybe the first or second, maybe it was the second class I took, that really got me questioning why I was still in public school at all.
What was the class about?
I don't particularly remember. I mean, it was about leadership in public schools. I don't remember. I'm like looking, because it was not the class itself, but it was some of the reading they assigned. So they assigned Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, but he basically makes the case that children are oppressed in schools. And so I have no idea why they assigned this book, but it was kind of like, okay, I can no longer be an oppressor. I don't know why I'm doing this.
It's amazing that it administrate, like, to actually do the master, she had to read that book. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
They were like,
they're
look,
weeding you out. That's what they're doing.
they were like, look,
They're like, if you know this person's they're gonna leave.
they were like,
They're on a court.
look, we know we're about to train you to be a warden of a prison, but we're going to tell you the people in the prison are oppressed, just so we see what your reaction is.
I don't know. I will say that at the same time that I was taking that class, the world was imploding with COVID. So I left the publics after that year of admin. I was actually on my way back to the classroom, but then I took this job running like a pod school during COVID, because we were all on virtual school for a full year here. And that job gave me lots of time to think and reflect, because I was mostly watching other people's kids do online classes. So there was lots of time for me to sit back and let them do their thing with their teachers. And it gave me just a lot of time to think about things. So between the class and my reflection time, which a lot of teachers will tell you there's like zero time for reflection in our lives because we're just so busy with teaching. That's what, and then I mentioned earlier, I have a sister who is kind of my big unschool inspiration. So she'd been doing this all along. Her kids are older than mine.
Was she in your ear?
Yeah. I mean, she was not intentionally, right? She was just there doing her thing with her kids, and me seeing how awesome their lifestyle was, that she eventually, but she does totally now go like, we finally got you over to the right side, you know? But she chose unschooling for her kids when they were like 1 and 3 or something like that. She hated school. She had a very different school experience than I did and hated it. So she never wanted to send her kids. She chose homeschooling. She found all the books when her kids were very young and figured out unschooling was for them. So,
yeah.
I don't think you're alone in that COVID. Like, so what I found, because we've unschooled the whole time, and our kids are 7, 13, and almost 15. And in the homeschool community, so many people came on board. They were so done with the public school. Although a bunch of people, when they came in, it was different. They were, like I said, we were talking before the show, as like all the people who've been homeschooling for a while, you're like, just no, don't say it. They all want to be like, well, we should get taxes back. We should do this. We're doing it at home, right? Everyone's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah. So it's like, I feel like COVID brought a lot of people, it opened a lot of people's eyes to what was actually going on, and then how the schools totally shut down. And I think a lot of people came on board from that.
I think a lot of people had an idiocracy moment where they saw what school was like, because parents finally got to actually look behind the curtain, right? So like, I mean, you would know, like, you do like, parent teacher night or whatever, and you tell your parents like, oh, well, like, we're learning this and this is how we go through it and all this other stuff. But there's not really parents in auditing the class, right? Like they're not sitting there in, looking real time at what's happening. But as soon as virtual classes happened,
Yeah, people saw a different side.
Parents were looking over kids' shoulders and they're like, what in the world is going on here? Right?
Yeah.
I like, what was so you weren't teaching during that. You were kind of like going through training, right? Like, or education during that whole process.
So the year that the shutdown started in March, right? So that was the year that I was in the admin position. My title was head teacher of the middle school because it was it was a 6 through 12 school, and we had a middle school side and a high school side. So I was head teacher on the middle school side.
Were you focused on like curriculum, like under the superintendent, or?
It was a charter school. Okay. Which means it was kind of its own entity. Like our director was also kind of our superintendent. So a little weird, but, and the charter school system in New Mexico is very robust. We have a lot of charter schools and they're not as crooked as they are in some states because of the laws that we have. So,
like wink, wink.
Let me tell you, we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like equity and funding and stuff like that, but, yeah. So my job was really to oversee a lot of the middle school stuff, mostly to work with the teachers. But I did end up there was supposed to be a second person that dealt with middle school behaviors because there's lots of that. But I ended up doing 90% of that too, because we had two different people in that position and they both kind of sucked. So I was doing that when the shutdowns happened in March. And then I had to apply for that position for the following year because my title was interim. And because I wasn't credentialed for it. So they ended up giving that position to somebody else for the following year, which was fine with me. And I was going to teach 6th grade math at that point. But then I got this offer to teach the pod school thing, which was literally watching over 9 kids. They matched my teacher salary. I could bring my own daughter with me. It was like the world was falling apart. And this sounded like a really great, and it was a really great thing. So, so that's what I was doing that year. So it was interesting to be there.
That is awesome because I can't express this to people enough. Okay, so social media is not real life, right? And so a lot of people think that what happens on social media is actually a accurate accounting of what happens in the real world, and it's completely not. It's you're in a bubble, right? But occasionally there is good information that comes to that bubble or through that bubble to the other people in it. And so there were literally people during 2020 and 2021 that were saying, we have a group of 8 or 9 families and we have, 12 or 14 kids among us. And we're essentially just dedicating this amount of money each. And we're literally paying a teacher to come from the school system who is a credentialed teacher to come teach our kids 3-4 hours a day, something like that. And that teacher is making out well because they're probably getting about as much as they were getting through the school system. And then, our kids are getting direct teaching under a teacher. And it was almost like a return to the one room schoolhouse kind of model. And so many people, especially here in New Jersey, and you understand what the dynamic is here, like there's a lot of people that are beholden to that, large public education kind of monolith that exists here. And they were like, that's ridiculous. There's no way that you're going to have enough resources and that teachers no way going to be able to teach kids from different age groups all at the same time. And they were almost kind of shouting into the void and being like, no, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to our kids because they finally get more personalized attention. There's no red tape or anything like that to walk through. I think that's incredible. The fact that you got that opportunity to transition out of that life into, like more of a pod. In fact, that being said, and I'll get off my soapbox, but Texas is one of the only other states, and I don't know if New Mexico is like this, but actually in Texas, if you create a pod and it's big enough, you can actually file with the state so that your tax money doesn't go to the school district. It actually goes to the co-op. Like, what an amazing freaking idea that money would then be reallocated to that, educational, organization or institution.
But-
That's an incredible story.
That's definitely not unschooling, though.
Well, no. And so that's a good question. So do you want to ask the follow-up question?
Well, so you were a teacher, then you taught in the pods, and then you were like, well, I don't really like this thing. You want to unschool. Did you go right to totally unschooling? Or did you try to do a curriculum or try to do the whole homeschool thing?
I actually did go right to unschooling, which I know is really uncommon, especially there's a lot of teachers. I'm sure maybe you guys have noticed this, but there are a lot of people who taught and then homeschooled or unschooled. I hear them all the time.
Like the combat veteran, they've been done with it, right?
Well, they
They
saw some shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, no. And it was kind of like that for me, that like I taught for so long, and it was when my child started school that I started to go like, this isn't really working for her, but I still kept pushing it. She was in 3rd grade, or she finished 3rd grade. And so we started unschooling when she was in 4th grade, and my youngest has never been to school. She's, but it was kind of like that. Like, I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw it in my own child. Like for me, I was like, I'm just over here doing the best I can as a teacher. But then once it was really impacting my own kid, it was like, I don't know if this is a good fit. And we tried a couple different schools, and then, and then that all happened. But yeah, so I am unlike a lot of former current homeschool, former public school teacher moms that I did like the complete 180. I went from public school straight into unschooling. But I think that's partly because of my sister, that I had that as my model. And I was kind of like, well, it's working for her and she's figuring it out. So I'm going to go that route too.
Well, deschooling is a bit even if you're going to go to like homeschooling, deschooling is a bit unschooling. We've never had to deschool, but where you just have to completely get out and kids have to just sleep and get back, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So deschooling is a bit like unschooling.
Yeah. What did that process look like? So it sounds like you had to go through it, at least for one of your kids. So for your eldest, what did deschooling look like? Did it take a long time? Was there, was it fairly easy to transition, or was it rough?
I wouldn't call it rough, but I definitely think she needed a lot of decompressing time for sure. I mean, we did, like I tell people all the time now, like, you don't have to wait to unschool, pull your kids out today. Like, don't wait till the end of the year. But that's absolutely what we did. We waited until the end of the year. I mean, I had this job that I was doing anyway. So, but I also decided to start this business all at the same time. So I kind of threw myself into that, and she was kind of doing her thing, just hanging out with friends or on her devices or doing her whatever she wanted. But I do think it took her, and she was fine with all of that part, but I think it took her a long time to kind of come back into herself. She did she was doing a lot of like people pleasing things and trying to measure up to other people's expectations, trying to figure out how to interact with friends. And I think that school kind of messed her up for a lot of that. But she's come around, and she's got some really great solid friendships now, and is really, I mean, it's common at this age anyway, but really coming into who she is at 11, going on 12,
And isn't that what they always ask about homeschoolers? But how do you socialize them? That's like the favorite question. That's all you get that everywhere. But how do they get their socialization? As if they're dogs.
I'm biting my defiant, sarcastic tongue by thinking about that. But let me ask a productive question. So,
I was just making mention.
No, I agree. And the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But so, your eldest, kind of transitioning from this traditional schooling to an unschooling, like I don't want to call it structure, but like kind of lifestyle. Did she carry some friends with her from traditional school, and then also has she made other friends in the homeschool community, and what does that dynamic look like? Do they cross-populate, or does she kind of like maintain two lives? What does that look like?
Yeah, so she didn't really carry a lot of friends with her out of public school. I mean, part of that is because it was the pandemic and we just weren't seeing anybody. And when kids are that young, she was like 8, 9 when that was happening. I think when they don't see people for a long time, they tend to kind of forget about them, right? So that was almost nice and easy for us, that like we didn't need to keep maintaining these schoolish friendships or school-based friendships. But she has definitely made friends in the homeschool and unschool community now. She has one friend that she met right when we first started unschooling, she was taking an art class at our art museum. Our city has a lot of nice classes for homeschoolers like our art museum offers art classes. So she was doing that, and she made friends with one of the kids in there, and they created a friendship very quickly. And they are still friends, but that friend did go back to school this past year. So, so she does, yeah.
So we're
back.
dealing with this, right? Because we're not really. I think our littlest is going to eventually ask us if she wants to go to school. Like I think our littlest is going to ask us in a few years, if your kids and you unschool them, we're like, I want to go to school. What would be the answer?
So we've actually already come up against that. It's happened. And I'll also mention that my husband is still a public school teacher. So he teaches music. He teaches elementary music. So he's the fun guy, but he's still there. And I still think it's really not good for him. But he's also really close to retirement. And he's also our steady paycheck. So he stays there for now.
Those golden handcuffs are tough to get away from. That's for sure.
They really are. And it was one of the things that kept me, I used to say to my sister, like, I love that you guys do what you do, but I could never live that life. And now I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where was I?
If they asked you, if they
asked to go to school. Right. So my oldest is technically registered as a sixth grader, or was registered as a sixth grader this year. So last summer she was kind of like, I think I'd like to try public school going into middle school. And even though I loved teaching middle school, I was thinking like, that is the worst possible time to go back to school, right? It's like the beginning of middle school. Kids are just all over the place, and some of them are terrible. And, so my response to her was that I said, well, what about getting up early? Because she's very much likes to stay up late and sleep late. Oh, figure it out. I said, what about homework? What about all these things? I was kind of like, if you're going to go to school, you kind of have to do the things. You can't just like show up and socialize all day. And I do believe that, right? I'm not going to send my kids to school to like be a teacher nightmare or whatever.
Yeah.
So I went through all that with her, and she quickly realized that no, she didn't want to do any of those things, and that was okay. So that was easy. My little one has asked a couple times too. She's 7 and just turned 7. No, I shouldn't say a couple times. She asked once or twice. And I think that's partly because so much of media glorifies school, right? Especially little kids media.
Everywhere.
They always talk about how exciting it is to go to school and how fun it's going to be and all these things, and TV and everything else. So she was getting that messaging because we, again, don't really do tech limits. And so she's watching what she wants, but they're talking about school on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So this was actually really fortunate because my niece, who's 17 now, but was probably 15 at the time, kind of got in her ear about it and was like, well, you're going to have to like sit still for long periods of time. And, my niece and nephew, my sister's unschooled kids, they have never expressed a desire to go to school, not once. Yeah. They've taken classes of things that interest them, but never asked to go to public school or traditional school or anything like that. So she helped me a lot get it out of my other kiddos. I mean, but if they were really adamant about it, I would let them go. Yeah. And then when they were done with it, I would let them stop, but I would make it clear that we weren't going to do kind of a like, go, come home, go, come home. We have to make some longer term decisions.
Interesting because you don't have the high school age yet, but it's an interesting situation to have like a pretty big homeschool or unschool community. And then you get to 9th and 10th grade and everyone's like in school and you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
It's because a lot of homeschool parents, and I don't know if it's the kids asking to go or the parents just feel like, well, they need to get a diploma. In New Jersey, it's not very hard at all.
That is a big thing, and maybe we need to ask you like what that environment is like in New Mexico. New Jersey is also really hospitable in the fact that the one thing that Chris Christie did when he was a governor was he signed into law that homeschool kids could essentially take like 3 or 4 courses at a community college.
30 credits.
Yeah, actually it's more than 3 or 4. It's maybe like 6.
Mm-hmm.
So they could take like 6 classes or so
and they can start at
a
like
community
14
college,
or 15.
And they essentially get a high school
diploma
diploma as a result of taking those community college courses.
Oh, cool.
What does that look like in New Mexico? I mean, do you have to just settle for an HSPT and that's what you get? Or is there some other course to getting a high school diploma?
So my understanding is that families in New Mexico, homeschool families, the parents can literally write a transcript and issue a diploma to their child, and that is graduating their child. The tricky part of that is that universities don't have to accept those things, right? Because they're not from like an accredited school or a public school. So they don't have to take a diploma or a transcript that was created by the homeschool parent. So there's that. We do have what we call dual enrollment here, where it happens with the high schools, where high school kids can take classes at the community college and then they get credit. They get both high school credit and college credit. And homeschool parents or homeschool families can do that as well. So they can enroll their kids in college as a dual enrollment student, and then they get the college credit. So they can essentially finish high school with an associate's degree if they start when they're 15.
They have the same.
They can take enough classes to have an associate's degree. So there's that. New Mexico also recently started making it possible for people to get a bachelor's degree, a whole bachelor's degree from a university for free here. So that's new. That's been within the last 2 years, I think. So that's really cool. Even before that, we had something called the lottery scholarship, where our lottery proceeds paid for kids to go to college. And they had to maintain a GPA of 2.9 or something like that, or 3. So there's that. And then I know this, so this is, I love telling this story because it cracks me up, but we have, so a friend and fellow unschool family, they're not strict unschoolers, but they're pretty unschooly. Their son started at community college this past spring at the age of 13. And he could not qualify for dual enrollment because he's not 15, but they would let him just be a college student. So he's, and he aced all their entrance exams and everything else. And so he's a college student, but not a dual enrollment student. But of course, his mom is his homeschool teacher, so she can put it on her transcript if she wants, right? So she will, but it just cracks me up. He gets to be a college
I've
student.
never met the kid. His nickname is now Doogie Howser. That's basically the way it goes. I'll be like, "What's up, Doogie?"
Right? Yeah.
That is the ridiculousness of standardizing education in a nutshell, right? The fact that a kid that is 13 can
not dual enrollment, but be a college student.
The bureaucracy doesn't recognize a certain level of attainment, and yet at the same time he's like, yeah, whatever, I'll just take the courses and take the tests and I'll get an A or a B, and that's just the way it is,
and he's a kid who is
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say he's
that
actually
kind of person. Oh, there we go again. I was just going to say that kind of kid. I'm like, oh, I'm second as a parent to my kid.
Yeah.
No.
Hold that thought. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Okay.
No, it's totally fine. And it's not, I mean, really, his parents are fantastic. Yes. But it's just the person he is,
Yeah.
But he is a super tall kid. He's at 13. He's well over 6 feet. And so none of his professors or classmates actually know how young he is because
he can pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just another funny part of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think what's also awesome about unschooling is it gives parents who are the ones that are best empowered and able to make these kind of at least assessments for their kids. It empowers parents to be able to not necessarily, push them in a certain direction just because there's some kind of curriculum or arbitrary standard of attainment that supposedly that kid has to abide by. It gives them that freedom to be able to kind of take the guardrails off and just be like, look, what direction you want to go in, right? And the perfect example is our eldest daughter right now. She's at the beginning when we started unschooling, I mean, even we had doubts. Like it just made logical sense.
We technically unschooled, but I did a curriculum for reading for my 2 older kids.
Well, yeah, it's not
That's
even
the only thing I did.
it's not even curriculum. It's just like a single book. And
It's
in
like
fact,
15 minutes a day.
I would say probably the only thing I would advocate that every kid get, like, you know, quote unquote taught is reading. But
we're not
again,
doing it with our 3rd.
but again,
because we can't. She's so hard.
teaching reading doesn't necessarily also have to be some kind of standardized thing. Like, kids read all kinds of different ways. I mean, like the classic unschooling story is the kid who wanted to like get a video game or something like that. And his mom was like, okay, well, you have to be able to read the user manual or whatever. And he basically taught himself how to read the user manual.
Well, you're
and that's how we learned how to
experiencing that
read.
with our littlest now, because she's teaching herself to read by playing the lyrics for songs that she knows the words to and watching them.
Yeah.
That's
So
what my nephew
She's
did.
7.
That's exactly how my nephew taught himself to read, by
Yeah.
listening to his favorite songs and following the lyrics.
That's what
And
she
then
Yeah.
he'd occasionally go to his mom and be like, why do these letters make this sound, when he figured it out? And she would just explain the rule. And then he went from there.
yeah. And she's using a medium that, and this is the classic unschooling example. She's using a medium that she's interested in. So she loves to sing. She sings all the time. And so she's using singing as a method to read, right? Versus the, you know, I don't have to browbeat this, but you know, the traditional curriculum is basically memorize and regurgitate, right? Our oldest daughter, who is obviously the first one, or maybe not obviously, but the first one that we've kind of like gone through with unschooling. Once she learned how to read, she's at a college level. Like, she can read, understand, analyze at a college level. Math, she ain't there, but she's 14, right? And so she will be advanced as far as reading comprehension, literature, writing. She'll be advanced far beyond her age for that, because it just clicks, right? And the day that she needs math, she'll figure it out.
She has
right?
like programs that if she wants them, she has the apps. And you know, she had my mom who knew math, who could help her figure things out. But she always was the one to do it. Like, no one ever pushed her.
Yeah.
And then but then she took like a homeopathy course, because so as we unschool, I offer them lots of courses. I don't ever pressure them. I'm like, hey, it would be fun if you learned this, if you want it. And if they want it, they go take it. And then I didn't even bother her, except be like, it's in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But she took a homeopathy class and she loved it. So I was just saying to her the other day, I'm like, we could get you into a homeopathy program to be a homeopath by the time you're 19 if you want.
That's a fantastic question. How do you manage like time management? Is that just something you leave up to your kids, or is it something where you kind of create a little bit of structure and then just give them some gentle reminders?
Yeah. So our unschooling time, day, week, whatever, looks a lot different than some, because we do have this space that I run. This like unschooly school, if you want to call it that. And we have like a full day drop off program where kids are there from 9 to 3. We also have like clubs where kids can come for just like an hour or so around a shared interest. So we do that. We do that 3 days a week. So we actually get up and out of the house and pack lunches and all that stuff 3 days a week. So that just the fact that we have to get up and out of the house it controls part of our structure and our day.
How many times do you have to remind them, like the night before? Because
we have a son.
my middle child, I could remind him 97 times and he would still be like, you didn't tell me that we had to do this.
Yeah. No, it's hard. And it's like, yes, the whole, how can we manage schedules can be really difficult. My oldest prefers that I make her lunch for her, which is totally fine with me. My youngest insists that she put her own lunch together. So I have to make sure she gets into the kitchen early enough to get her lunch together so that we can all get out of the house. I do end up waking both of them up on days that we go because they stay up late. And even though I'm like, hey, you might want to go to bed a little earlier, they're like, nah, we're good. So, but I've become an early riser. I never was before. But and that's actually really lovely for me. So I'll get up at like 6:30 and I'll spend a couple hours on my computer, like getting a few of my own things done before I then, take care of myself and get them up to. And I've also structured things a little bit differently this year where I have a second person working with me, and she is an early person. So she gets there first. She opens the place up and is there for the first hour or so. And then my kids and I show up a little later, and then she leaves a little earlier, and we kind of close the day. So it's nice to find different people with different preferences and strengths that we can work that out with, because last year we were trying to get out of the house at like 8:30 in the morning, and that was just a ball of stress for all of us.
I will say this, that we have a son. So you're talking about how you can tell him, but when he has some kind of thing on the computer, like something's coming out, and he'll set his alarm for like 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, he knows
to be up at 3:50, and he can be there. It's just like when they're what's that word? Motivated. When they're motivated, they can do whatever they want.
If it's something that's not high on his priority list, then all of a sudden, like, the excuses come out. It's
and so with my oldest, even, because she's gotten old enough to be at home by herself for a while, especially with my sister and her husband work from home, so they're home a lot, and so it's nice to have them right there. So there have been times where I'm waking her up in the morning, and she's like, "Oh, I don't want to get up," and I'm all, "You can stay home if you want," but she still chooses to come almost every time, because she has friends there now, so that's her motivation to go. Even though she doesn't love getting up early, she still recognizes that she does have some fun when she's there, so that's nice.
Yeah.
You had said something before we got on, we were talking, and something that I absolutely understand as an unschooling mom. And maybe you could elaborate on it. This idea that as a mom, it can be stressful because we have to decondition from our own public schooling, and there is pressure everywhere. And especially if you're homeschooling, the pressure is like, oh, I'm on this curriculum, I'm on that curriculum, they have this thing good, right? But when you're unschooling, there's a totally different, like, constantly being asked questions, and how did they do this, and what did they do this, and and it's like there is a massive amount of deconditioning that has to happen for the moms and dads too, right? I would like if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so that deconditioning is actually what I call the other kind of deschooling, and that's what I meant when I said deschooling earlier. So there's the deschooling that people talk about when you pull kids out of school, they need some downtime, they need to not have any demands, that kind of thing. But I think about deschooling as this like lifelong process of undoing all the conditioning that was done to us, especially those of us that went to school and then participated in the system as an adult for a long time. So it's like peeling back all those layers and like questioning myself a lot. So that's actually what I was referring to. And that is, whatever you want to call it, deconditioning, deprogramming, deschooling, inner healing, whatever. That's what I'm working on all the time. But it's that frustration, right? Where it's like, I want my kids to grow up to be free thinkers and creatives and strong-willed people, but can't they just listen to me when I want them to do something, right?
Like, see, I'm schooling over here, but I need your help now.
Yeah. Or the like, why are you fighting with your sibling? Like, can't you just be nice to each other, kind of thing? And yeah, that gets really frustrating.
I'd like at least a half dozen times every single day in my mind, I'm like, why do you have to be such an independent thinker? Why can't you just take my word as
because I said so.
Law? I am God. You're supposed to listen to me, right? Like, but it's not that. It's like it's the exact opposite of that. Which, in the moment when I'm getting super frustrated, I have to take a beat and be like. Sometimes I will actually utter to like any one of the three kids. I will be like, I am so frustrated by you right now, but I'm also so in awe of how defiant you're being. And it's like, it's acknowledging the existence of that free thinking. And I once put it this way. I was like, public school creates graduates, right? Homeschooling and unschooling specifically create like literal individuals. Like if you want the individual, go find an unschooler and you chat them up for like an hour. They will blow your mind. Like it is absolutely incredible how different of a person that exits
Even in
that
a family,
process.
like we have 3 kids, all 3 so different, like individual across each other.
Oh my God.
too.
Yeah. Like, in fact, I've like the moment that we were going to entertain having a 3rd child, it was like, you realize when we have 3 kids, like we get voted off the island if they gang up on us, right? Like that's the way it works.
Yeah, they haven't yet.
The good news is that we operate like the federal government and we just keep them at odds all the time. And that way they can't come together and vote us off.
So wrong.
All right.
So
That's
wrong.
that's my
No,
political
but
rant.
this is
So anyway, ask
beautiful.
another question.
I often say to myself, because sometimes I think to myself, when you unschool and you develop and you let these kids grow into who they are, because there's a quote. What is the quote? The quote about like
The Gatto quote?
what's the Gatto quote? What's that?
I don't know. You tell me what you're talking about.
Oh, there's a quote about. Now I've totally lost it because you talked to me. There's a wonderful quote. You showed it to me.
Yeah.
Just about this idea of being an individual. And what worries me sometimes, and I have to get over it, is like I have 3 total individuals going into a world that's not made for unschoolers. like, will they ever be able to make it and thrive? And I know they will. And I also believe the world is changing.
Mhm.
But like, I do have to, sometimes in my head, I'm like, just trust. They'll find their way. Like every person has their own. I don't know what that quote was. Now it's going to bother the heck out of me. I don't even.
I have another quote, but I want to hear your answer, Kristen. Like,
I didn't have a question, but
do you have your worries, like your concerns that when they get to adulthood, that they're not going to fit in, like that they'll be,
it's not fit in, but somehow like get into like just be able to be successful in their own way.
Yeah. I honestly don't worry that much about it right now. Maybe it's partly because my kids are still a little younger and I'm like, there's lots of time before they're on their own, you know? But I mean, yes, as a parent, and I've talked with other people, like as a parent, I feel like no matter what you do, you're always questioning yourself, right? Like, I don't know, if you force them to go to bed early, you're like, is this the right thing? If you let them stay up late, you're like, oh, is this the best thing? Maybe they should be sleeping soon. I don't know. That's just one example. But as far as them, I agree that I think the world is changing. I also think lots of us free thinkers and people who walk outside the box, we've made it this far. There's lots of us. And I feel like that movement is growing. And so I'm just kind of excited for them to continue to grow that movement when they get to be adults too. And I think in the long run, most unschooled kids don't want to live in a very conventional setting. They don't want the conventional jobs. I mean, yeah, you hear about the unschooled kids who like become doctors or vets or whatever. And that's great. If they want to do those things, that's fantastic. But I think they're also going to be a lot better at like holding their own boundaries and not completely folding to the system, but like living in it just enough to get what they want out of it.
Generation of anarchists.
Yeah.
I remembered the quote. I don't remember the quote, but I know what it was about. It was about parenting to allow a child to, your job as a parent isn't to shape your child, but rather to create the environment for them to shape themselves.
Yes.
I don't know what you gave that quote to me.
Yeah, that's a John Taylor Gatto quote.
That's a great one.
You fucking said that.
Yeah.
Why did you say the quote?
Well, he's got tons of quotes. I don't know.
Like, what?
He does have a lot of quotes.
You just did that purposely to me, but it's a great quote, and that's what I think of. Like when I'm having stressful times, I'm like, I'm just supporting them into. It's not my job to make them like little versions of me, and it's not your job to make them little versions of you or what we think would be perfect. It's like they are a beautiful soul. It's probably older than both. I'm sure their littlest is older than both of our souls, and like just coming into this world, I like to remember that they chose us. And think that way I don't have all the responsibility. Their soul chose us.
Are you abdicating responsibility?
No, I'm sharing it.
I'm kidding.
But I do. That's the way I try to like that idea of like relaxing and trusting. It's not easy. This world is not easy.
You know what quote I like? This is my favorite quote in the entire world. No, stop. No, it's not that quote. My favorite quote in the entire world, and I always butcher this, so this is not verbatim, but it's essentially the greatest breakthroughs in human history have not been people that have done things the way that everyone else has always done them, right? It is someone that had the just crazy, absolute, insane idea to do something completely different than everyone else has done it. And they are the ones that make the great breakthroughs. It's not the person who decided to do the same thing as everyone else and just do it like that much better. Those are just marginal improvements. The people that really move humanity forward are the ones that, they're willing to ask the questions that no one else has ever asked, or do things in a way that has never been done. And sometimes that involves a sombrero and a sarong and weird clothing and crazy math and all kinds of other stuff that's included.
Abacuses.
Yes.
We have not actually, for anyone who's listening, defined unschooling versus homeschooling.
Well, that's a good question. What would your definition or just your general explanation of unschooling?
Yeah, because there's homeschool, unschool, and then there's also, maybe we should do all three: homeschool, unschool, and radical unschooling.
Are you giving her a standardized test right now?
She's a teacher.
I can handle it.
Do it. There's a multiple choice.
Yeah.
Choose to answer as many or as few of those questions as you.
Well, you have to define the three separately.
Well, yeah. Homeschool, and homeschooling looks so different depending on who's doing it. And there's a lot of people that won't call themselves unschoolers, but I think are still very unschooly. But school at home, right? It's when people kind of recreate school at home. They buy the curriculum, they do the workbook. They generally will never spend as much time on school as public school kids do, because they can do all that stuff in a much shorter time. So some people say kindergarten, 30 minutes a day, second grade, an hour a day, whatever. But that's kind of traditional homeschooling, or school at home that we call it. Unschooling has so many definitions. But in short, sometimes I say it's letting kids learn what they want, when they want, how they want. It's them choosing their own path. It's a lot deeper than that. Of course, you both know that. It's, we provide lots of support and encouragement for our kids to help them figure out what they like and help them find ways to learn the things that interest them if they need it. Some kids are fine figuring all that out on their own, and others want a lot more support with it. But unschooling as an educational philosophy is that it's just focused on the learning and the learning path and allowing kids to take the lead on it. But then when we get to radical unschooling, to me, that's much more of a parenting philosophy. And I don't understand how people can unschool and not find their way to radical unschooling, but people do it. So, and there's people that call themselves almost unschoolers or whatever they want to call themselves. But radical unschooling takes that whole freedom of education into all realms of living life. So, and that's when we talk about, we don't give bedtimes, and we don't do limits on tech, although tech limits is still hotly debated even amongst radical unschoolers.
Oh my God, you go on the radical unschooling site and if one person's I turn the Wi-Fi off at night, they're there's a debate. But you know what? I understand it, because we have a son who is, we're trying really hard, right? We're trying really hard to just let him do his thing. And he's so he learns a ton of shit from the computer. I don't even know half the stuff he knows, and he's making money on it and doing these things, right? But I believe in circadian rhythm. And then there's this part of me that's I'm your mom. I can't let you get too far off your circadian rhythm. I do think that screens, he has a VR, that cannot be good for your brain. So where does my responsibility, as a mother begin? This is a constant with me. The girls, I don't even think about. My littlest, I think about them all the time, but my littlest has an iPad, but she'll put it on while she's doing art or while she's doing 10. And I know it's not even her
background
focus.
Noise.
It just keeps her mind busy. It's I go right at the bar, right? Because it keeps my mind busy, the outside conversations. But with my son, you can see a personality shift, and I worry about those, the Bluetooth, whatever it is around the brain, and then the circadian rhythm, because you can see if he hasn't slept. What we do now is, for the most part, we're we what's the word? We we mirror for him his mood swings. We mirror for him. You've got bags under your eyes. We mirror for him. You're not in a great mood. Did you not sleep? We try to mirror so he can start to feel and see, if we've noticed he's eaten a lot of crap. I was going to say shit, but whatever, same thing. That we'll be well, we'll mention it, right?
Mhm.
But we won't necessarily get down on him, but we'll mention it, hoping that he's kind of hearing, like, he likes to cook. So sometimes I go, let's cook together. And sometimes he'll do it, sometimes he won't. But like, as a mom who's holistic, I understand. We do radical unschooling, but I understand every time I see the thread, I'm like, oh, pangs in my heart, because I totally understand and I totally get it. Because it's like, is he old enough to really understand like what this, because he'll say to us, what does he say about the, screens don't change your dopamine. Is that what he says? Screens don't change your chemicals in your brain, which we know it does, right? Like, there's been scientifically proven.
No,
or is that what he said? How does he say it?
He'll basically say like that he doesn't feel any difference, right?
Oh, okay.
And then he'll just blatantly say it's not.
So we try and take an empathetic approach, and the empathetic approach is basically, as opposed to the authoritarian approach. The empathetic approach is, we're trying to look out for you. We're trying to make sure that you're healthy. We don't want you to be hurt, like those kind of things. And so we want you to be able to continue to do these things without harming yourself or compromising your ability to do them in the future, because, some of these things can do that as well. And it's tough because he's a kid. He's still, brain formation is still happening. And so it's not, but there's also that element. And what's funny is like, I obviously clickbaited the title, right? The idea that like, unschooling is basically this just kind of lazy parenting lifestyle.
Oh my God, we worry all the time.
Yeah, a lot of people think that unschooling is just basically you hand your kid an iPad and you walk off and do whatever the hell you want. It's the complete antithesis to that, right? Having no structure means that you actually have to probably think and analyze and work on it more than you would if there was some kind of rote, like MO that would happen every single day.
Well, you know what's interesting before you go to that question?
Wait, we're on a long monologue.
I'm
I want
sorry.
to ask Kristen first.
Yes.
So, you're basically facilitating, you're helping parents unschool and that kind of thing. You personally, or what kind of advice are you giving when it comes to, screen time limits, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So I usually just talk to families about figuring out what works best for their family or for each individual kid. Like you said, you have more conversations with your son about the effects of using technology than you do with your kids, than you do with your girls, because it impacts him more, right? So yeah. I when I'm talking to families, I say what I do for my family, and then I tell them that if that doesn't work for their family, then they need to figure that out. But the biggest key is, holding respect for your kids and having respectful conversations and being connected to them so that you trust them and they trust you and you can have these conversations. And I think that, like you said, that's very much the opposite of lazy parenting. We work so hard to form these bonds with our kids to make sure that they trust us, to make sure that they know that we trust them. And it's still really hard because they still don't always believe the things we tell them. And your discussion about technology with your son reminds me a lot of conversations I had with my youngest about food, because she will eat just sugary things all day, every day. But then I have to stop myself and go, no, that's not true, because she does eat vegetables when we put them in front of her, and she does eat protein and, stuff like that. But she really loves sweets. And sometimes I have to have these conversations with her, like, hey, babe, the reason you're hungry every 5 minutes is because you're putting all of this stuff into your body that literally just goes through it so fast. And then you're hungry. And yes, it all tastes good, but you need to eat some of these other things too. And sometimes I don't even say them as calmly as I'm saying them right now. I'm like, just eat something else. But
and
yeah,
just can help with that when they get their first cavity. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny is my little one, when we go to the dentist, they put that pink stuff on their teeth to show, how good they're brushing. She brushes really well.
Yeah.
So she's got it under. She's like, Mom, I got it. You can even implement just after you eat something sweet, brush your teeth.
She's life hacking.
Well, I found that I was just going to say this before, I found that since we've been talking to our son about it, right? Have you noticed that every 3 or 4 days he sets himself back to sleep at the right time? It's like, it's weird. It's like every few days he'll sleep
what I try and do is I've actually had to go through not just a deschooling process, but I've had to go through kind of like a rewriting of how I was parented, right? And so that's also part of that process. A lot of us were parented, especially if you're like Gen X or if you're older millennial, you were parented by parents that were very authoritarian, right? Like they were very much like, this is the way we do things. And you're like, why? And they're like, doesn't matter. That's the way we do things, right? And so I've had to rewrite that script. And so when I used to approach him, it used to be very adversarial because I would basically tell him, it's bad for you. Stop. We do it this way. If you don't do it this way, it's going to harm you, right? Like now what I do is I try and draw more of a parallel to when I identify that he's in a moment of distress or discomfort as a result of his behaviors, I call attention to that. And I don't do it indignantly. I try and say it empathetically with love. Like, hey, bud, right now you're really irritable. And that's because, maybe you only got 4 hours of sleep or you got 8 hours of sleep, but I saw you were on the screen right before you went to bed. That's going to interrupt your ability to have good sleep. And that's why you're not feeling good right now. And so, yeah, it takes time after time after time after time to remind him of that because, look, I mean, I'm a stubborn SOB. When someone tells me that something is a problem the first go around, it's probably not going to stick, right? I have my set patterns that I think work for me, and it takes me Jocelyn knows being married to me. It takes me a while to really kind of like even open up to the concept that like what I'm doing is not, the best way of doing things or that there's an alternative. And so I think a lot of parents, and again, hearkening back to the clickbaity title, I think a lot of parents that resort to authoritarianness, I think they're the lazy ones because it's really easy to be like, this is the law
and not have to.
And this is what we abide by. And you're like, oh, well, it's really difficult because you constantly got to reinforce the law and this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, yeah, but you're not tailoring it to your child. You're basically taking some cookie cutter, whatever it be, cultural, norm, and you're then applying it to a dynamic human being, and you're trying to jam them into that, that cookie cutter kind of shape. Right?
What I'm thinking of is when we've kind of discussed on unschooling, but it's not that it doesn't have boundaries. Like, and it's not that it doesn't have, like, we are constantly holding the boundary of being kind to each other in the house. Like, it's like between siblings, right? Like, yeah. It's not that when you unschool, kids are learning, doing their, like, an example is our daughter who just, does book clubs and School of Rock and homeopathy. Like, that's her life. Like, and it takes all of her time, right? Pretty much.
Wait, so what's the point you're getting at?
And well, now I'm in the middle and you cut me off. What was I talking about? There's boundaries. So yeah. So
this is why we unschool, ladies and gentlemen.
No, so I said not so much for her because she has her stuff, but between the two siblings, we're constantly holding boundaries, but not strict, not authoritarian boundaries. But there are boundaries about how we treat each other, not hitting, right? And a lot of radical unschooling is about natural consequences, which you love as an anarchist or whatever you call yourself. But like the idea of natural law, natural consequences. And so it's not that unschooling, and maybe you could speak to that for a minute. It's not that unschooling doesn't have boundaries. How do you hold boundaries in your family?
It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, like, it's hard to hold boundaries without imposing the consequences that authoritarian parents impose. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out as I go. And I'm guessing you guys are too. So like you mentioned siblings hitting each other, like we still have that to some extent, where my kids get physical with each other and it's getting better. But it's just that conversation all the time. I've started using the term like, hey, I don't hit you guys when I'm not getting my way. So like, why are you hitting each other? Or my little one will even come at me once in a while if she doesn't like my answer. Like if she asks if we can do something and I say, sorry, we can't do that today. and she'll start coming at me, and I'll say, hurting me is not going to get you what you want. Like, that's not how the world works. You don't hurt people and they suddenly want to do your bidding. That's so, it's sinking in. And I think sometimes I refer to unschooling, radical unschooling specifically, as sort of playing the long game. And then I say, well, it's not a game at all, right? Parenting is not a game, but that's what we have to do. We have to model for our kids what we think a healthy, upstanding adult does and looks like and how they act. And when we're doing that for ourselves, they're going to eventually start to pick up on that and adopt some of it for themselves. But they're just kind of figuring out how the world works.
Yeah.
And there's also do you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I love that natural consequences standpoint, because ultimately I want the kids to make their own decision. Like, I want them to come up to their own conclusion. I also want them to understand that when they come up to their own conclusion, that there are, positives and negatives that can come from that. Right. So that's fine. You do whatever you want. Right. At the end of the day, I'm going to try and give you the information that I think is relevant for you to make a good informed decision. But at the end of the day, you get to make whatever decision you want. And if, by the way, there's a negative consequence to that, I'm going to call your attention to it and be like, hey, I advise you to do the other thing. You decide to do your own. That's fine. But the other thing is not to like browbeat them, because I think that's also something that is a possible kind of like dark area that you can go into, where when you allow kids to make their own decisions, when there is some kind of negative consequence or, quote unquote failure that's associated with it, I think there is like a righteous indignation on the part of the parent where
I told you so.
Yeah. Right. Like there's a like, see, I told you that's what was going to happen. You should listen to me next time. I
have to hold myself back from that.
Yes.
Which is antithetical to what it is to raise someone who's making their own decisions, because the last thing you want them to do is associate everything that you say with the truth, right? Like, or the way the world is. They have to, like, if you are truly raising an individual, the meat of it is really that, look, I have a perspective, right? And that's where I'm coming from. I'm giving you this information. This is the decision I would make if I was in your position, but I'm not you, right? And so it's really tough, because I think a lot of parents also
goes back to that quote,
don't think of children as autonomous beings. I think a lot of them think of children as possessions up until a certain age, and that age differs based off of the parent. But there's definitely like kind of like almost like a possession thing that exists among parents. And look, I'm not here to tell other people how to parent. Well, those
kids becoming reflections of their parents, the people who think in that direction.
Yeah.
So just on this,
I'm very snarky. Like when I was in high school, like my parents weren't necessarily snarky. They were very authoritarian. Like if I got picked on by someone else in school or something like that, and I was very precocious when I was younger. So my parents would be like, oh, well, the same stuff, turn the other cheek and go find a teacher or whatever. I would be like, well, that's because they have really crappy parents and their mom drinks and like all this other stuff. They didn't find that very funny, by the way.
It's not easy to hold boundaries, and that's like another piece of deconditioning for a mom. I think also unschooling and gentle parenting are connected a little bit, in the sense that like when you're kids are younger and you're gentle parenting and you're like, I don't want to punish. And the reason I always said I didn't want to punish is because I wanted kids to make their own choices and choose that they want to choose to be kind over choosing to be, rather than feeling like they had to because they were going to get in trouble. I never believed in any of that. I didn't believe in getting in trouble for that kind of stuff, right? Like this idea. And I think a lot of that kind of moves into unschooling as well. And you want kids to want to do something because they want to, not because they feel like they want to make someone proud or, do something like this. You want them to do it because they want to do it, that they feel like, and it comes from who they are. And so it's like a constant deconditioning. It really is, especially as Gen X.
Where did you come from a gentle parenting standpoint? Like, was that a staple of your upbringing, or was that something that you came to on your own?
My parents were, my mom was the one in charge in our house. My dad was just kind of there. But I shouldn't say it like that. My dad was just kind of there, but really my mom was the primary parent, and she also was the primary like discipline person.
Sure.
My parents were not hitters. They never hit. Well, I shouldn't say that. I believe they spanked my mom spanked one or both of my sisters once, and then decided she was never going to do that again. So in that regard, my mom was a cycle breaker,
Mhm.
but she still used lots of other, we got grounded. We were told, we had to do things a certain way. And if we didn't do but my mom did do a fair amount of explaining and telling us like sort of the why and stuff like that behind things. So there was a lot of conversation, but there was also a lot of her giving us consequences if she felt that was needed. So that's kind of how my parenting was, or how I was parented. And then coming into being a parent myself, I kind of started a similar way. And so I've actually had some conversations with my oldest, apologizing to her because she'll say like, why don't you ground my sister like you grounded me when I was 7, or something like that. And so then I have to say, well, I've learned that that's not actually the way I want to parent, and I'm parenting very differently. And I've changed things with how I parent you, but also with how I parent your sister. And so I've apologized to her and told her that sometimes being the oldest child means you're also the guinea pig, and the parent has to try things out on you before they figure out how they want to go. So, but I did also come into it from like, I found like attachment parenting fairly early on, but even attachment parents sometimes go the route of authoritarian. And I think with gentle parenting, that word or that phrase, whatever, has a lot, people have a lot of different meanings for that one too.
It's like a huge umbrella.
Right. Whether it just means you don't hit, or it means, different things. So, but I do think there's a lot of overlap. Some people call it conscious parenting, or I don't know, there's some other ones, peaceful parenting. Yeah. So there's a lot of that. And I think there can be a lot of overlap between that and radical unschooling, but I still think radical unschooling it's probably the most extreme, for lack of a better word, of it's like
extreme,
really,
but like let your kids be themselves.
Children. Yeah, exactly. Like having utmost respect for our children and really recognizing that they are whole humans with their own agency, Yeah.
Can we have a spitfire round of questions, like yay or nay? Wait. Do you have any ideas? I do.
You're asking me if we can do something that's your idea.
Well, no, I don't. You have to help me because I only have a few ideas.
Well, then how are we supposed to have a spitfire?
Because we'll start, and then you come. I'll do the first 2.
Okay.
And then you come up with the next spitfire rounds.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready? Wait, are you religious at all? Are you religious?
Oh, no. I was raised Catholic. I do not follow a religion at this stage of my life. For a while, I called myself an atheist, and I don't really identify that way anymore either, because I feel like there's so much more going on in the universe, right? But I don't even call myself spiritual, and I definitely don't align with a religion. No.
Okay, so I just had to ask that. So I'm going to ask a few, not really spitfire, but so if one of your kids was like, I believe in God, I want to go to church, what would you do?
Okay, so we've had this experience. We have my oldest was invited to attend a youth group at a Christian church by one of her friends, and she started going. It is a church in our town that I know to be very conservative and kind of like an evangelical mega church kind of space. Sure. And so she went. I told her she could go. I was really nervous about sending her. She's come out to me as gay, and I was worried about that for her at a space like this. So, I let her go, and I really struggled with whether or not to talk to her about what I know about this church. And I eventually did tell her, like they preach against people being gay. And she said, oh, I know that. Nice. So she went for several months. At one point in time, she did tell me that she had a conversation with somebody where like they saw a pride sticker on her water bottle and asked her if she was gay, and she said no. So that was kind of heartbreaking for me, for my kid to be like denying who she was. And then at one point there was going to be a weekend-long retreat that she wanted to go to. And thankfully it costs a fair amount of money. And I was like, oh, we can't afford that, right? Was my first. And then she was like, well, I think they have scholarships. So at that point, I said, look, I can't let you go on a weekend-long retreat with people from this church. It's against my better judgment. It's against my beliefs. And she kind of asked me about it. I laid down my biggest issues with this church, or with churches like this in general, which was that they don't respect children and they don't respect women. And she kind of questioned me on that. And I actually pulled up their website, and their leadership team was all men. And so she saw it a little bit. And I said, and they look down to children. They believe in hitting children. They believe in putting children in their place. I don't believe that. I said, I'm sorry, I can't send you to this weekend-long retreat with youth pastors and these other kids. And she said, okay. I said, I have no problem with you going to the youth group for a couple hours on Saturday nights, if that's, and the next day she said, I don't want to go to that church anymore. And
that's awesome, because you actually showed her how to research. This is total unschooling, right? By giving your opinion, you showed her how to research into something to see if it's with a value of her. You were really open with her. This is why I'm going to show you, that. That's very unschooling in the sense, because not only does she understand more about you, she understands more about how to research into something, what questions to ask. It's something that she was interested in. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And she said, I don't want to go anymore, but I still believe in God. And I was like, great, that's totally fine. You're allowed. So yeah.
Did you introduce her to any other religions?
I haven't. And that's something. Yeah, we haven't gone there yet. There are a couple of churches in our town that I know are very much more accepting of all people and that kind of thing. So if she did express a desire to go back to a church, I would probably point her in the direction of one of those.
I have an idea for you. I did it here before COVID, and it was such a phenomenal success. Except really then COVID happened. I got together all the homeschool unschool families, and once a month we would go to a different religion, to a temple, to a mosque, to everything. And I made it so that when we went, they took part in a ceremony of some kind, and then because they're homeschooling unschoolers, they had to have an open hour question and answer. So there had to be that open, because the kids would ask questions from one to the next.
That's where the most beautiful
they wouldn't understand. Because one time they're wearing a mask. They're wearing the
job or whatever.
Yeah, they're wearing, because they had to put something over their head to be in the temple or the mosque. And so it would be different each time. And their questions would go from Greek Orthodox to Tibetan to Hindu, and the kids and the parents loved it and the kids loved it. It was a great way to experience a ceremony in each. We even did a pagan ceremony in the woods with a witch. It was freaking awesome. And everyone was different, and it was a beautiful experience.
Heresy.
If you have that by you, it's so fun to run it, and so many people loved it.
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
And there were evangelical Christians that took part in it, homeschool families that were.
Well, you got to learn eventually, because you're going to run into people in all different religions. I think that was the point of why I started it. Yeah. Was we're going to meet people who are Jewish, who are Tibetan, who are who believe in all these different things, and
yeah.
You at least have to be able to tolerate them in your life, I loved it though. I loved every ceremony. I'm there's something beautiful about every one of them.
The beauty of that, I think, is the 1 hour question and answer period.
Yeah.
It is the most fantastic period of time for anything. I think, I went to a private Baptist school until I was in 4th grade. And, at one point in time in 3rd grade, we got in trouble because we were asking questions that no one had an answer to, right? So me and a couple of my friends were very, again, precocious, and we were literally asking questions using, religious text and things like that. And there was something where we were admonished for, causing a disturbance in the middle of class or whatever, and that was a fantastic.
It was super fun.
project or just kind of
we
like
did it for
experience
months,
most
and then
kids.
COVID happened, and then one got canceled, and then I just never picked it up.
Yeah.
But wait, second fire was not very fast.
No, it wasn't.
Do you believe in age of consent laws, like for driving, for war,
This is all right.
No, because
Okay.
an unschool. I'm interested in an unschoolers.
All right, let's go.
Because a mom of an unschooling child knows their child better than anybody else. What do you think in age of consent laws for all different?
I honestly haven't given a lot of thought to that. So that's an interesting question. I mean, I guess I get why they have rules, especially around like driving the, I don't know. I'm not really a fan of war at all, so I don't want anybody signing up for the military. But I think 18 is too young. I do think 18 is too young for military. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even have a good answer, to be honest. I feel like the laws are in place to protect people, but I definitely can see. I definitely can see people, people knowing that their kids can do things sooner or later than what is the standard, for sure. I mean, there was a mom, oh gosh, this poor mom posted on some of the unschool groups on Facebook recently. Maybe you even saw it if you're in any of those groups. But she sent like her 6 and 4. She didn't send them, but her 6 and 4-year-old wanted to walk to Starbucks and get things for the family, and she let them. And it was not a short walk. And I guess they like drew them a map and gave them direction. Like they did all the prep things, and they sent them on their way. And I think the parents waited like 10 or 15 minutes, and then they went and like followed them from enough. Yes, they quietly followed so that the kids didn't know they were being followed. But of course, the parents really wanted to make sure they were okay. And so this was posted in 2 different unschool groups that I was in. And a few people were like, hey, that's really cool. But most people came down, even in the radical unschooling group, most people came down on this mom saying, that's too young. That's far too young for you to send your kids out like that. And the bottom line, and I didn't comment on any of them because I'm not out there to get, I like to comment on posts, but there's some that I just keep my mouth shut on. And
some of those groups are severe.
Yeah. But the bottom line is that mom knows her kids. She knows her neighborhood. She knows, she knows. And that's what for me, a lot of things come down to. Like, you're the parent, like you just said, you know your kids best. And that's
this
what we
is
have
why
to trust in the parents too.
This is why I don't get in those groups, because like she asks me all the time, like she'll be like, oh my God, this is a discussion in the group. And I tell her what I would respond, and she blushes.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Because she's like, I can't do that. And I'm like, literally, I don't care if I have no friends in this group. In fact, I don't know anyone. I'd be like, they're my kids, Karen. I get to say what happens with my kids.
But
right?
if that was me, I'd be in a little bush. Like the minute they left, I'd be like,
what's funny is that's like reminiscent of, there was a news story up here in the Northeast, and I think it also got national press, about a mother who lived in New York City. And I don't even know if she was like an unschooling mom or whatever.
Story you're telling.
Yeah, like her 10-year-old or something would ride the subway, right? Like going from school or their lessons or something.
In New York in the 50s, people did it all the time.
I mean, like, I have other views on it. Like, I mean, if I could arm my child, it'd be a different story. But like, yeah, like there are tons of people that are like, oh my God, like that should be illegal and that shouldn't be taken care of. And it's like, or that shouldn't be allowed for that parent to do that. And there's definitely a commentary within our society about how much say other people should have in your relationship with your children, right? And
or the ages.
What you're either allowing, or not necessarily using the word allow, but like what you're kind of like, inspiring them to do, or
it's not easy. I mean, for me, I wouldn't be able to let my kids on a subway having taken the subway many times.
Oh, not now.
No, but
No.
but like when my parents used to take the subway from Queens and everywhere all the time. And
I would tell my kids, I don't take the subway
Yeah.
now. I'm not going to allow you to take them.
but you can't even here in New Jersey, like you can't even let them go to like the Whole Foods alone, because it's like someone will call someone on something and do. It sucks.
There's definitely an intrusiveness. All right. We're going on an hour and a half. I want to be
wow.
respectful of your time and like not take too long.
Did you have a Spitfire question before we left?
I just want to ask you, in terms of what you're offering as far as your, I guess you have kind of like a consultative business that you're doing. Just in general, what are you offering to parents that are either currently homeschooling, unschooling, or looking to homeschool and unschool?
And is it specific to New Mexico or across the board?
It's anywhere. So I have a couple different things. I mean, I offer one-on-one coaching, at an hourly rate, and that is fun, but not a lot of people sign up for it, to be quite frank.
Sure.
Which is fine. What we have that's been a lot more successful is we started offering like an unschool parent support group. And so I started doing that as an in-person group at my space, and another mom was like, it'd be really great if we could offer this online, why don't we work together and I can facilitate the online? And I said, that's great. So we started an online group as well. And that one has brought in parents from different states. So that's really cool. And then recently she was like, I'm not that into the online thing. So we've switched roles. I'm now facilitating online and she's facilitating in person. But yeah, we've gotten some people from different states, and that's a lot of fun. And it's really great, I think, and that one's free. Like anybody can join that one. And I just feel like the community aspect is so, like, the one-on-one is nice because you can get specific with people and help them problem solve specific things going on in their family. So that's great for those people. But just the idea of having that community where you can talk about your experiences and hear from other people what their experiences are, or let them give you some feedback is really nice. And so we've been doing that for like a year and a half.
Just alone, moms need community.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're a mom who's unschooling your kids. You're ousted from all the other mom groups. They don't get you. It's not like, and even if you try to I have a lot of moms groups, can you tell? And even if you try to comment and you're like, well, maybe your child needs a little freedom, it's like you're cut down. And so like, if you have that freedom mindset, and that like unschooling mindset, you need community. Like, thank God there's a ton of unschoolers that I know, like, I'm not super close, but I can absolutely reach out and be like, hey, I got a problem. Like, I got a situation. I need some support. Like, to have that, and for it to be free, to be online, to be easy enough to go to, like, and if you need to get out of the house, you take your laptop to the coffee shop, right? Like, or sit in your car.
Even in the car. Sometimes I see people join from their car. Like they leave the kids in the house and they just sit in the driveway or something.
The support is so needed. We are divided so much. And when you find like in that community of the freedom unschooling, it's a rare community to really find a good group.
I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing that Ritalin and 3 more structured courses can't solve.
What is the name of your community and where can you find it?
Yes, yeah. Where can people
Can
find more
I be on it? I'm going to be on it.
You can. Yes. Yeah. Hey, I've got your email address. I'll just add you to the list.
Send me along or put me in. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a personal website called KristenHimm.com, and my coaching information is on there. For the group that we do, that one through our space, and that one's called ABQ Homeschool Connection. That's my website. And then my KristenHimm.com website is also linked to a web Facebook page called Unschooling America. And that one is not as active as I would like it to be because it's just me and I'm not great at that kind of thing. But our ABQ Homeschool Connection Facebook page is active because I have someone else that does it for me. So that one's active, and yes, there it is. And if you go to if you go to the resources coaching and consulting, if you click on that one, that is, up top there is a link to join the group I was just talking about.
Complete the interest form here.
Yes, that is the form to.
You know what? I think I'm going to join, because we all need support, and it's hard enough to be a mom, but then to constantly decondition yourself, constantly decondition your kids, constantly be able to be present, to be gentle, to be aware. That shit takes a lot of energy, and to be with other people that know it, like, and can understand it, and can like just fucking give you an ear, right? I need an ear sometimes.
I always know when we're getting to the bottom of the line, because she uses the F word.
Yeah, I did tell you that before.
Yeah.
No, but it's so true. So I encourage anyone who's a home. So is it also a space if someone's curious about unschooling and
Sure.
like or homeschooling or?
Yes, we say it's for people who are just thinking about unschooling to people who have been doing it forever and everyone in between. For sure.
So for anyone who's listening, like if you want to go and just get like an idea of who the other unschooling families are, and we were actually talking before the show about world schooling, which is a whole nother animal, which is amazing. And, just developing communications and like connections with people.
Yeah. Go
check it out. And maybe you'll get some information there too.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to share with us that we did not touch on today?
I mean, I feel like we could do this for another hour and a half for real, but I also, it is getting close to dinner time in our house. So,
anything else you would like to retract?
Specifically what did you say?
I said anything else you would like to retract, so you don't end up like on an FBI list or anything like that. Okay. With that is the end of the show. Kristen, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time. This is obviously not a paid gig, so this is a voluntary thing. So
no, but it's so much fun.
In the description below are the links to Kristen's pages. So
go to the resources and then the sign up sheet if you want to do the chat or the group.
And if you're in the Albuquerque area, you're in Albuquerque, right? If you're in the Albuquerque area, check out the summer 2024 programs that are also going on. So any other questions?
No, we should mention what we have next week.
We're talking about portals
in New Jersey.
Awesome stuff. Great for unschooling. Absolutely.
Fantastic. You know what? Our son was big into Bigfoot for a while, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he took him to all the sites in Bigfoot from here to Pennsylvania to go see where the sightings were.
Yeah.
That's what you do when you're unschooling parent. Yes. You're like, well, today we're gonna go look at some Bigfoot sightings.
I gotta say, some of the places were creepy.
And so next week is paranormal wonderfulness, and I cannot wait.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Have fun at dinner.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you guys.
Echo your mind, it's time to redefine. You're the spiritual quest, leaving the rest behind. Ungovernable, breaking through the status quo. We untamable, watch our spirit elevating consciousness. Yeah, we on the rise. No system can hold us down. We're reaching new heights, breaking through the chains, breaking through the wall. Ungovernable energy, watch the empire fall. Watching in the norm, shedding old beliefs, seeking truth and purpose, finding inner peace, unleashing our potential, setting our souls free. Ungovernable spirits, changing our reality.